Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. And today on Patriot Radio, well, China. Has it begun the invasion of Taiwan? Yes, you heard that correctly. And the rise of the Ottoman Empire as predicted. And lastly, is Trump really serious about Greenland and why? And today our guest is going to be Alex Newman, senior editor of the New American Magazine and also of Liberty Sentinel, talking about the issues of the day and what you and your family need to know to prepare. That's what we're about here at Patriot Radio, bringing you the most accurate information first before anyone else, so you can be prepared for the times ahead. Indeed, the times that are already upon us in this brand new year. And if you want to follow breaking news in real time, intelligence, analysis, and updates, please follow us on Telegram right here at this QR code. Get informed so you don't have to doom scroll all day long. You can get your news in the evening or in the morning, and you can get it all before everybody else. Also, you can follow us on Rumble, and we thank everybody in the Patriot TV audience who has been watching. We are broadcasting on Patriot TV 2 to 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every Saturday and Sunday, and really appreciate all of the great folks at Patriot TV. We've got a couple new things we're going to talk about here regarding Patriot TV as well. We have a merch store that's going to be opening up for Patriot Radio. So if you're interested in having a Patriot Radio coffee mug reminding you to be a patriot who spreads the news and doesn't just receive the news, you're going to want to check that store out. A whole bunch of other items, but I'm going to save that as kind of a teaser. That brings us now to your encouraging word today from the Word. And it comes to us from 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13. Be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. All that you do must be done in love. Be strong in the Lord. Be strong in your faith. Be strong as a warrior for Jesus Christ. And especially in this time where things are so up in the air right now, and prior to the inauguration, it really does seem like there's going to be some other big event. And we just got through the certification officially of Donald Trump as the 47th president of the United States of America, but it seems like there's going to be something that's going to happen here coming up soon. So be strong, stand strong, be in prayer. And if you haven't been fasting, we as Americans we can fast. We can afford to fast. It's okay. But take a couple of days, pray and fast about this new year. Pray and fast about our country. Pray and fast about your family. The direction of this country is so important. For generations to come, it's worth a couple of days of prayer and fasting. Now, one of the other things I want to mention here is it's going to take all of us to stand strong, stand against the tide that's coming, stand against the globalist cabal that is attempting to thwart, undermine what Donald Trump and his cabinet and everyone else is going to help him do. You can make a difference in your own personal life by standing strong against these things in your workplace, at school, everywhere you go, and changing the narrative back toward the truth. I remember some folks were, saying some negative things about yours truly. And you don't receive those things, but instead you declare who you are in Christ Jesus. And you don't have to defend yourself against charges of being a white nationalist or a white supremacist if you do missions in Africa and you have one of the most diverse churches in the city of Spokane. You don't have to defend yourself. All you have to do is declare who you are in Christ, and that is somebody who is a temple of the Holy Spirit, through whom God can transform people and the nations. That's who we all are. We are world changers if we want to be. We have to stand strong in the time right now and the time that's ahead. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing, coming to us from the China front. Now, I want to describe what's actually happening in South Korea right now. Years of Chinese elite capture, that's where they would compromise senior leaders, and years of infiltration into the South Korean government. There is an attempted hostile takeover by the left. That's what is explaining all of these weird things that have happened in the last month. The communists are trying to take over South Korea. And at this point, South Korean leftists raised the Virginia state flag saying, Sic Semper Tyrannis. And the reason they did that was in response to other protesters raising the U.S. flag who stood for freedom. And the corruption investigation department that tried to issue an arrest warrant at a press conference, South Korean police declared that they would not comply with the anti-corruption body CIO's order to arrest President Yoon. The military is standing by President Yoon. Things are about to get real. Why would this be happening right now? I'm going to tell you what this is. This is an indicator that China is going to invade Taiwan on a near term. That's what this is. Now, near term doesn't necessarily mean days or months. Within a year, maybe a little bit longer, but it could be way sooner. You don't expend this kind of political capital and expose your clandestine organizations inside of South Korea unless you want to try to foment something and create chaos there right prior to a war. Now, the war plans of the Chinese are to invade Taiwan and then for North Korea to immediately invade South Korea if the U.S. intervenes so that they tie up U.S. forces in South Korea. That is the war plan. In addition to that, elements inside the United States, hostile, foreign, special operations intelligence, and ground units, like sabotage units, would be activated inside the United States of America. They would also attempt to try to take some resources, at least in the near sphere of the South China Sea, predominantly near the Philippines, although some war plans and some speeches that have come out of China that were previously secret seem to indicate that they would try to also invade Alaska because it would take too much for us to project power up there, and yet there are many natural resources up there, predominantly oil, that China needs. All right, so the bottom line here is that we would expect to see other indicators that China was prepping the battlefield for an invasion of Taiwan. Which brings us to a couple of interesting things that have occurred in the last week. First, China's simulating a surprise U.S. missile attack in the South China Sea. So how would they defend against a U.S. missile attack? Chinese wargamers play out successful U.S. stealth long-range missile strike on PLA carrier group in a contested area. China's simulated defense against a U.S. stealth missile assault reveals a high-stakes battle for technological supremacy in the South China Sea. Okay, that's one indicator. Here's another indicator. China cuts undersea internet cables to Taiwan. This one's huge. Taiwan then decided to reach out to Japan for help over the Chinese ship cutting undersea cables. What I suspect is going to happen is that they're going to try to get cables from Japan to Taiwan. But the fact of the matter is, this is something you would do trying to cut communications prior to a war. This is clearly a probing incident and clearly a preparation of the battlefield. This indicator tells me, again, China is going to invade in the near term. Also, Christians face extreme persecution around the world, and particularly in recent years. Being a Christian has obviously come with life-threatening risks and extreme challenges. But where are the most unchristian or anti-Christian nations in the world? Well, the top two are North Korea and Somalia, according to Visegrad 24. Al-Shabaab militants openly targeting Christians in Somalia and in North Korea. Death, imprisonment, and labor camps. So sometimes we think that there is not a nexus between Islam and the communists, but there is. It's called the red-green axis. And in fact, Carlos Ajacal, one of the most infamous terrorists, said that it had to be an alliance of communists and jihadists that would overwhelm Christianity and Western civilization. So when we begin to see persecution of Christians ramping up, that is another indicator. We are starting to see that in China and North Korea right now. Also, Indonesia has officially joined the BRICS as a full member, which also includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. So it's very interesting that now you have an Islamic country joining the BRICS, which is a key country because it is right near something called the Straits of Malacca, a key choke point for oil going to, of course, China. That brings us now to the Middle East front. Egypt violates peace agreement with Israel. This is, again, a very significant thing. Now, Egypt stated that it was going to begin attacking Houthi targets in Yemen, but Israel has detected military activity by the Egyptian army in central Sinai, which violates the peace agreement between the two nations. Egypt is engaged in logistical preparations and building military obstacles in central Sinai. This is a significant escalation there. Not quite sure what's going on, but we're going to be watching that over the next few weeks. And most people don't know that Egypt is actually the only country that switched sides during the Cold War. So this is a critical move by Egypt. They're saying they're going to attack the Houthis, and they start doing this in central Sinai. What Egypt's up to, I don't know. But I do know what Turkey is up to, and I do know what Recep Erdogan, the wannabe caliph, is up to. Turkey is building 31 warships domestically. Turkey's defense ministry announced that 31 ships are under construction in local shipyards. You can take a look at this. This looks like they're preparing for war as well. In addition to that, Turkey is ready to intervene if Syria breaks up. Recep Erdogan said Monday that his country is ready to intervene if Syria breaks up following a rebel takeover in recent weeks. We will not consent to the disintegration of Syria or disruption of its unitary structure under any guise. They're saying this because the United States proxies, the Kurds and the SDF forces are fighting the SNA forces and the jihadis, former ISIS and Al-Qaeda elements, backed by Turkey in northern Syria right now. You have almost a NATO-on-NATO clash at this point. And the interesting part about this being that Turkey's saying it would intervene if it thought they were going to lose control. This could spin way out of control really fast there in the Middle East. But again, Turkey is a key indicator of what happens in the world and what happens from an eschatological perspective or end times perspective. We always watch to see what happens with Turkey. Could it be this March 3rd, that Recep Erdogan announces the reestablishment of the caliphate? Because in 1924, on March 3rd, is when it was abolished. So this would be 100 years later. We're going to watch it and keep our eyes on it very closely. Also, experts have estimated that approximately 40% of Hamas's tunnel terror network, remains operational more than a year after the conflict, and suggests that hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, some of which may still contain hostages, not only are intact, but it would be difficult to dismantle those without further substantial resources. And back to Turkey and U.S. proxy forces, SDF reports it is inflicting severe blows on Turkish-backed SNA, who numerous precision operations targeting their positions, gatherings, and equipment. I would suspect that maybe some of our special forces are helping there, both U.S. and Israeli. And lastly, the United States released 11 Yemeni detainees from Guantanamo prison just before Trump takes office. Why are the Democrats always releasing terrorists? And it's not just them. There's some Republicans and Republican presidents did this too. Why are we doing this right now before Trump takes office? Doesn't make any sense unless, of course, you're trying to destabilize things. Also, Israel is told to prepare for possible war with Turkey. Nagel Committee warns. The Nagel Committee, formed by the Israeli government, has issued a serious warning about the growing risk of a direct conflict with Turkey. The report describes Turkey's push to restore Ottoman era influence as a major threat, potentially even more dangerous than the challenges posed by Iran. It also warns that Turkey could use Syrian forces as proxies to stir instability in the region. Now, from a biblical perspective, the fact that Israel now controls Mount Hermon is gigantic. Number two, the jihadis there have in Syria said that they will not stop in Syria, that they will proceed to Jerusalem and Medina and Mecca and Saudi Arabia. We should take them at their word. When we come back from the break, more from the Russia front and also some very interesting things happening here on the national front prior to January 20th.
Attention business owners and entrepreneurs. Patriot TV is launching a brand new TV series showcasing American-made products, and your business could be featured. Whether you sell your products online on Etsy or Shopify and dream of reaching millions of viewers on smart TVs like Samsung, Sony, TCL, and LG, or apps like Roku, Android, and Apple TV, this is your chance. We're searching for U.S.-based businesses offering all types of products and services proudly made in the USA. If you've ever wanted to showcase your products on TV like QVC or the Home Shopping Network, now's your opportunity. Support our American economy, grow your business, and be seen by loyal Patriot viewers across the country. Know someone with a business or have a business yourself? Don't miss out. Contact us at supportingpatriots.com today. Be a guest on this new exciting TV series. Let's put your American-made products in the spotlight.
Vladimir Putin will remain in office until 2036.
Putin is being called bold.
What's your strategy to bring them back to the Stone Age?
Daring. You won't be able to look away.
How can his kingdom last?
Putin. Rated R. In select theaters January 10th.
And that is from Horizon Events, a bold and daring new thriller, Putin, that tells the inside story of Vladimir Putin's rise to power and imagines how, in the near future, that rise could come to a shocking and very quick end. Rated R in select theaters coming Friday. Check that out. It's very interesting how the movie industry right now is really gearing toward patriots and Christians. I love it. And now, very appropriately, the Russia front. There's an update on Russian naval activity near the Tartus port in Syria. Effectively, here's what's happened. The Russian Navy has abandoned the Tartus port. Now, here's why this is important. Russian submarines can no longer operate in the Mediterranean without that port, and they have since been seen going through the Strait of Gibraltar back up to the Baltic Sea. This is a huge strategic blow. What I suspect that the Russians are going to do is build something in Libya and attempt to establish some kind of a base there, not only inland, but also maybe on the sea to resupply. Because right now, from a strategic standpoint, the Russians don't have anything there in the Med. And that is a huge blow. Also, Ivory Coast has become the latest African state to kick all French soldiers, 600 of them, out of the country. Now, you might think that this is suddenly in what is called the Sahel. This is suddenly a revival of freedom. Now, that's not what's going on. This is an operation by the Russians to kick Western countries out of that area of Africa. France earlier was forced to leave Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Senegal, and Chad. well, something clearly is going on here. And Wagner Group has been confirmed operating in many of those areas, if not all. What does that mean? Well, the French only remain in Djibouti and Gabon. So I expect Gabon to go next and Djibouti soon after that. All right. Finnish police said they have recovered a missing anchor as part of an investigation into sabotage of power and internet cables in the Baltic Sea. Now, there was this misnomer, and Stanislav Lunev, who is a high-ranking Soviet defector from the GRU, which is the military intelligence arm of the former Soviet Union, but it stayed that in Russia, talked about how the Chinese and the Russians have always been allies, and they're going to work together. And so you have a Chinese ship that stopped in a Russian port that, again, drags its anchor, cutting power and internet cables in the Baltic Sea. Again, I think this is an indicator preparation for war. Now, if it's happening around Taiwan, everyone's like, okay, this is happening in Europe too. Something else is going on here. And I think this is more than ever a flashpoint in the world. Also, messaging service Telegram passed vastly more data on its users to French authorities. Now, I've told people this for a long while. Telegram is a great place to post news. Post news there. Post intelligence analysis updates, great. I would not use it as a messaging service. There are far better messaging services that are far more secure. Wire, Sessions, Simplex. And Simplex, for example, mitigates against quantum computing hacking. So, understand that Telegram is not secure as people thought it was. And I'm not talking about necessarily the encryption protocol as much as I'm talking about who's running company now. Like really running it. And the fact that they were forced into this when they jailed CEO. France did. The other thing is, I've been hearing from people about WhatsApp. WhatsApp is not secure. I don't know who keeps saying that. WhatsApp, everybody uses WhatsApp. WhatsApp, we got to go WhatsApp. Stop going to WhatsApp. Use an actual secure messaging service. And understand that everything is about data right now. You don't think WhatsApp analyzes your data? Of course it does. That brings us now to the South America front. Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro has accused Argentinian President Javier Milei of plotting to assassinate Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez. You know, he's made a lot of claims recently, but here's the point behind this. There is a lot of tension that is building in South America as a bloc of Paraguay, El Salvador, and Argentina continues to strengthen the freedom bloc in South America to counter China's influence and the communist influence in Latin America. That brings us now to the national front. Now, I'm putting Canada in the national front because who knows? It could be the 51st state. Donald Trump once again renewed a call for Canada to become the 51st state. Now, I don't think it could work that way. I think each of the provinces might be an individual state. So you're talking like we're going to get that and maybe Puerto Rico after. I mean, we're going to be up to like 60 states soon. So after Donald Trump has been doing this now for like a month, Trudeau finally responded. And it was so pathetic that it garnered a massive blowback because he resigned as the Canadian Prime Minister. And here was his quote: "There's not a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States," end quote. The only problem is he's losing control of Canada, and so are the leftists, which is why Pierre Poilievre, conservative leader, vows to undo Trudeau's failed policies, and he promises to put Canada first, cut taxes, stop rising crime, and end immigration and fix the budget. Yeah, and it's resonating with people. We could see a sea change here very soon in Canada, as this will likely be the next prime minister. Of course, unless there's shenanigans. Now, interestingly, today, and I don't have the video, and I'm sorry, President Trump's plane with Don Jr. landed. Where did it land? It landed in Greenland. And Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene plans to introduce a bill renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, on the heels of President Trump saying maybe we need to retake control of Panama, and we do need and have strategic interest in Greenland. And there might be a freedom movement in Greenland that is in the offing right now. Clearly, Denmark is very upset about this, but Trump responded by saying that, well, maybe we should impose tariffs on Denmark if they don't want to cooperate. Why is everybody talking about Greenland? Well, because based on some advances in technology, there is going to be an Arctic corridor that is going to open for shipping lanes. And guess what? It goes right past Greenland, making it one of the most strategic places now in modern times. The other main strategic place is something called the Bering Strait, which has been between Alaska and Russia. And if we could bring that map up right now. The U.S. Army is supposed to, we should build something there, but there should be a defensive base at the Bering Strait and turn it into a very well-guarded area for the same reason that Greenland is a strategic point of interest. So is Alaska. Now, can we bring that map up? Doesn't look like it. Okay, this is one of the posts. The U.S. Army must build a defensive base. All right, so then the U.S. Arctic presence falters as Nome Deepwater port solicitation is canceled. So if you don't know where Nome, Alaska is right near the Bering Strait. And now a deepwater port solicitation for the Navy was canceled. So not only are we not having a Navy base there, we're not going to have an Army base there. We need both. And I hope this is something that President Trump takes very seriously to secure that strategic choke point as well. All right. Also, the U.S. Federal Reserve's top banking regulator announced his early resignation on Monday. And as far as that's concerned, we're going to see a lot of rats fleeing the ship. We're going to see a lot of people that are going to say, hey, I don't want to get into possible criminal investigations. I don't want to be around when Trump comes in, because they know that something is going to happen, and that something is a reckoning. Well, some people have been saying the word revenge, but it's really not about revenge. It's about a reckoning. It's about people being held accountable for their actions, people being held accountable for breaking the law, people being held accountable for lying to the American people, covering up the American people, weakening our defense establishment. So, as this resignation is probably, I would just say it's kind of one of the first of many, you're going to see probably in the next week and a half, 2 weeks, a lot more of these. And it's just people that are showing their true colors. Now, people should be taking note of who these folks are, because they should not come back into government if they were involved in corruption or crimes, for that matter. Also, a breaking report, higher fluoride exposure in children is linked to lower IQ levels. CNN even reporting now, acknowledging what conspiracy theorists like Robert Kennedy and Alex Jones have claimed correctly for years. Wow. Also, so it's been interesting, the narrative change here in the last 2 weeks. There's been a real narrative change. This happened with this explosion of this Tesla truck down in Las Vegas. And I've been trying to put my finger on it, and I've heard some other people talking about this, and it really, I agree with the sentiment. The narrative the ruling elites are curating right now, that they're trying to foment right now, is that the U.S. military and its veterans are the biggest threat to America. That's the narrative that they're trying to foment right now. So understand, this is an active measure from communists and probably some support from some jihadis. This is an active measure, a narrative attack against U.S. military and Army veterans and Navy veterans and just military veterans in general. This is an attack against them. Attack against us. Attack against you. So don't fall for it. And push back anywhere you hear it. That's something you can do. Just in, given to us from Gateway Pundit, North Carolina Supreme Court blocks state from certifying Democrat incumbent Justice Riggs as winner of election as GOP challenges shady ballots, quote unquote. It's interesting. The Republican Griffin was leading the race until all of a sudden Democrat Riggs overcame her opponent weeks after the election. President Trump won North Carolina by more than 3%. I'm glad they're investigating. Also, a massive fire in Pacific Palisades, Los Angeles. We just lift them up right now. We just pray right now, Lord, that fire goes out in Jesus' name. It's engulfed multiple homes and dozens of vehicles. It's rapidly spreading, covered 700 acres. There's a lot of alarms going off about this right now. Please pray for those down in Los Angeles. Now, I want to end with just this thought. As we see China doing what China is doing, and we see this push right now for the United States to reclaim control of Panama and Greenland, and you'll have some people say, this is just mean rhetoric. No, we actually have a president who understands the global implications of what China is doing. China's influence in Greenland to try to get its rare earth minerals. China's influence in Panama Canal to control that choke point in the event of a war. And the fact that the Chinese are being so vociferous about this, I think tells me and should tell you, President Trump is on the right track. And that is the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. And again, if you want to follow us on Telegram, here's the QR code. And remember, we give breaking news and real-time intelligence updates. And thank you to everybody that supports us and the show. When we come back from the break, the great Alex Newman.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Hey folks, it's your buddy John Rich here and co-founder of Old Glory Bank. Let me ask you a question. Why would you trust your banking with people that hate you? Well, you shouldn't. We're building a freedom economy and now we have a pro-America bank. It's called Old Glory Bank. Check it out at oldglorybank.com and open yourself an account today.
Old Glory Bank is a full-service, FDIC-insured online bank with business and consumer banking and customers in all 50 states. It takes just 8 minutes to open an account at oldglorybank.com.
You know, Sir John Bagot Glubb actually wrote about the age of empires and that typically countries last about 250 years. Next year is the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States with the Declaration of Independence, 2026. So we're going to see a lot more about this in the coming year as well, that we really need to be celebrating these things and that we need to break the paradigm that Sir John Bagot Glubb had, because I think the globalists wanted to make it a reality, and it's only us as standing in their way. And that brings us now to our guest today, Alex Newman, senior editor of The New American, also Liberty Sentinel, libertysentinel.org, thenewamerican.com. Alex, it's great to have you back on, one of the great investigative journalists of our time.
It's great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me, man.
So let's talk a little bit about the rise of the Ottoman Empire. Turkey making some huge moves and some fairly significant statements saying that they would intervene if there was going to be a breakup of Syria. Clearly talking about the Kurds. I mean, that would be NATO on NATO potentially if U.S. forces are there advising the Kurdish, which they are.
Yeah, it's very troubling. I think Erdogan needs to be regarded with great suspicion. Frankly, the fact that the regime in Turkey is a member of NATO really discredits NATO more than just its founding charter and its globalist aims. When you have an Islamic wannabe superpower with a history of genocide, persecution of Christians, arresting journalists, these things, of course, are coming back again. That's not the kind of government we want in an alliance of alleged Western countries against tyranny, and it's self-evidently ridiculous. It I think, debunks the whole notion that NATO is an alliance to protect freedom. And I was in Turkey just a few years ago, and it was very concerning. Erdogan was arresting Christian missionaries. He was arresting journalists. I believe he played a big role in staging that fake coup that resulted in the arrest of about 50,000 people. And then you look at the influence of Erdogan in Syria. It's almost as nefarious as the U.S. government's influence in Syria. On the one hand, the U.S. government was financing what eventually became ISIS, and they knew that this was Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They said it, Defense Intelligence Agency report in 2012. They said the Syrian rebellion is led by Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood. The goal is a Salafist principality in eastern Syria, of course, what we call today the Islamic State. And they brought these people to power. And when it came out that they were funding actual known jihadists and Al-Qaeda terrorists, they said, oh, whoopsies, here, let's go fund some other different people to try to stop this. And it turned out they were funding a communist terrorist group masquerading as a Kurdish liberation group, the PKK, which I think Turkey is right to have concerns about, even if they kind of exaggerate a little bit what's going on there. So funding jihadists and then funding communists to fight the jihadists that you've been funding. Explain to me in what world this makes sense, especially when you're in $40 trillion worth of debt. It's insane. And the people who are going to pay the worst price for all of this meddling are going to be the Christians of Syria.
How do we end up funding both sides of a war, right? I mean, for American taxpayers, the answer, I think, in many respects, rightfully, is let's just stop sending money altogether. Let's stop funding. And by the way, the Muslim Brotherhood is an avowed enemy of the United States of America. Yusuf al-Qaradawi, their spiritual leader who passed away here a couple of years ago. Obviously, he is not in heaven. And obviously, right now, he is, his legacy is living on. How do we have this debate? Because it really shouldn't even be a debate at this point. I'm not saying it to shut down dissent. I'm just saying we should never agree about funding both sides of a war.
Yeah, and you'd think that'd be like basic level common sense, right? Even if you believe in foreign interventionism, how can you think it's a good idea to fund two different warring factions that are shooting at each other and targeting innocent people in the middle? It's frankly grotesque. And what I think it shows is that our founding fathers were absolutely correct. Almost all of them were firm believers in non-intervention. Yes, we need the ability to protect ourselves. Yes, in the modern era, we need fast airplanes and advanced technology and important ships, but we don't need a standing army and over 100 military bases in over 100 countries. We don't need special operators worrying about every tin pot dictator and revolution and terrorist group in the world. We need to defend our southern border is what we need to be doing. But even if you ignore kind of the principled argument that foreign intervention is just not a good idea. I mean, even if we did know what exactly was going on, it wouldn't be a good idea. But you take a look at the track record of this foreign interventionism. I mean, from World War II onwards, the U.S. government has a record of nonstop calamities being brought about through our foreign interventionism. And even World War II, if you go back that far, yeah, it was great that we defeated the Nazis. My granddad fought over there, fought against the Japanese. Respect for all of that, and our Congress declared war. That's the way it should be done. But then you look at how they built up Uncle Joe and the mass murdering clowns running the Soviet Union, who then turned around and pointed our nuclear technology at our cities, gave it to Cuba. They brought Castro to power. In every instance that I know of where the U.S. government intervened, maybe enough exceptions that I could count on one hand, the situation has gotten worse rather than better as a result of U.S. intervention.
And there's a couple of questions here, too. We have, it's literally called the Valley of the Christians in southwest Syria right now. Israeli lines are fairly close to it at this point. They've been attacked by Al-Qaeda. The Christian churches, their Orthodox and other churches have formed militias to protect their people, and they're holding a line down there in that valley. Wouldn't that be something that the United States should say, hey, we're not going to intervene, but we're going to go protect those people there from getting slaughtered? I mean, at the very least, could we do something allegedly humanitarian that was actually humanitarian?
Yeah, you would think so, right? If the government truly believed the things it claims to believe, then, of course, that's what we would be doing. But I did an article about this for the New American. It was actually a cover story, and it broke my heart, Matt, because even I didn't realize how bad it was. I want to encourage people to go read it. I'm going to see if I can pull it up real quick so I can give people the exact headline. But this was well over a decade ago, and it was about U.S. foreign policy directly leading to enormous numbers of Christians being slaughtered. And it was so heartbreaking. You look at Iraq is a really good example. There were millions of Christians in Iraq. They survived jihad and Islamic invasions and communism and civil wars and all that. And then the Americans showed up, and it was an absolute disaster. Today, there are a few 100,000 left. A lot of them live in hiding. They're desperately trying to get out. Adding insult to injury, a lot of those Christians who fled from Iraq went to Syria, thinking they would find safe haven under the dictatorship of Bashar al-Assad, because he was a nasty dictator, but like Saddam Hussein, he was an equal opportunity nasty dictator, and he wouldn't let the jihadists cut the throats of the Christians. And so huge numbers went into Syria. There they were slaughtered as well. You look at the governments that receive American foreign aid. Pakistan is one of the most ruthless persecutors of Christians in the world. They literally execute Christians if one Muslim says they said something bad about the Quran or Muhammad or anything like that. And yet they're one of our top foreign aid recipients. We give them all kinds of help. You look at what the Obama administration did in the Ivory Coast. There was a disputed presidential election. There was a Christian against a globalist Muslim. The Christian won the election. The constitutional court of that nation ruled that the Christian won the election. And yet Obama and the UN decided that no, the globalist Muslim won. And so they started bombing the country to smithereens. They arrested Gbagbo. And over and over and over again, Libya, Egypt, everywhere where the U.S. government has been intervening for decades now, Christians bear the brunt. Christians are slaughtered in huge numbers. And why are we surprised? Look at how they treat Christians in America. Bake the cake, right?
Exactly. And this is one reason I think the Trump administration has to declassify Presidential Study Directive 11, which is the strategy to support the Muslim Brotherhood. That people need to see this was an actual policy of the United States that led to the Arab Spring, and then all of the things that happened in Syria and everything afterward.
Yeah, absolutely. That is essential. And you see that so clearly in the Arab Spring. In fact, we had retired generals coming out and saying, wow, Obama seems to have changed sides in the terror war. We were partnering with and by we, I mean the U.S. government and the NATO establishment, were partnering with guys who were telling the press that they were Al-Qaeda, who were boasting to anybody who would listen that they believed in terrorism against the degenerate West and all the rest of it. So I want to encourage people to really spend some time on this. You may not have enough money to support missionaries overseas. You may not have the courage to go out and preach the gospel, but can we at least agree that our tax dollars ought not be funding the extermination of Christians around the world? So the article I did, Matt, I found Google makes it very difficult to find anything now, and a lot of search engines follow Google. But I found it. It's called Christian Massacres, a Result of U.S. Foreign Policy. This was published April 23rd of 2012. The situation has only gotten worse since then. And I hope people will read it, and I hope people will contact their member of Congress and say, look, $40 trillion in debt, $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Stop giving people money to murder Christians.
And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about China and some other folks that want to murder Christians and have put them in prison as well.
Behind the power.
Vladimir Putin will remain in office until 2036.
Beneath the secrecy.
You'll be the most powerful man in the world.
Is the real story that defies reality. Putin is being called bold.
What's your strategy to bring them back to the Stone Age?
Chilling. You won't be able to look away.
How can his kingdom last?
Putin. Rated R. In select theaters January 10th.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle, I'm about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's feeling like more energy, more get up and go. And it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
And we're back with Alex Newman, senior editor of the New American Magazine, and also with Liberty Sentinel, libertysentinel.org, and thenewamerican.com. Alex, we were talking before the break about mass murdering regimes and well, ideologies as well that want to kill Christians, and how the United States has really been on the wrong side of this in its funding, in its intelligence operations. Let's talk about China. Undersea cables cut by the Chinese off of the coast of Taiwan. Clearly an indicator they are intending on invading in the near term. I'm not talking like maybe the next week or something like that, but in the next year, certainly before 2027 and before what is being told to our military establishment. How do we look at this? How should we be viewing this threat from China? And what are you hearing regarding the globalists? Because a lot of the globalists, I think, secretly want this to happen.
I think it is at this point indisputable, Matt, that a lot of the globalists want this to happen. And it's not even so secret anymore, right? George Soros has come out of the closet on this over a decade ago. He gave an interview with the Financial Times where he said China has a better economy and a better functioning government than the United States. He said that communist China should own the New World Order in the same way that the United States owned the Old World Order. These are direct quotes from one of the most powerful men in America. You look at the World Economic Forum. You look at Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum. Him and Xi Jinping are like two peas in a pod, and they brag about it. They put out press releases talking about how much the World Economic Forum has done to bring China into the modern age and build up their economy, which, of course, builds up their military. And again, we have U.S. foreign policy directly to blame for this catastrophic and existential threat we now find ourselves with. If you go back to the takeover of China by the communists, this was engineered by subversives in our own government. That is a fact. It is indisputable. John F. Kennedy talked about this in the Congressional Record when he was a congressman. And John F. Kennedy was no conservative firebrand, okay? You look at people like George Marshall, Secretary of State, Secretary of War, deliberately putting an arms embargo on our ally Chiang Kai-shek. Then Henry Kissinger building up communist China's military might under the guise of a Sino-Soviet split, which anybody with a brain would have been able to tell you was totally fraudulent from the beginning. They have built up communist China into a superpower. And by the time this is all done, if these evildoers get their way, the United States will be severely cut down to size. And I mean by massive, massive amounts. And all roads will end up leading to Beijing. And you have the U.S. taxpayer financing this horror. You have the United Nations openly promoting this. They're telling everybody who will listen, you should join the Belt and Road Initiative. You should connect yourself to China. This is being done on purpose. And it's part of what the globalists have been calling for over a decade now, the multipolar world order, where you knock the United States out as the unchallengeable hegemonic power, and you bring in China, you bring in the Kremlin, you bring in Brazil, South Africa, etc., and suddenly you have a very different world order, not based at least loosely on the principles of national sovereignty, individual liberty, but rather slavery, technocracy, and global totalitarianism.
Which is why I think we need to be cautious with all of these tech folks surrounding President Trump right now. There are some avowed transhumanists that are speaking into policy right now, and you know, there have been some people like Laura Loomer who have taken a hit on the chin on social media for calling some of this stuff out. How do we approach this, and you know, what does this bring? Because AI is something we need to talk about. It's something we need to be involved in. But there is so much negative that could come out of this. How do we balance that?
It's a very good question, Matt. And, I think we absolutely do need to be calling out these nefarious influences. And it's not just on the tech side. It's on the foreign policy side. It's on the climate side, right? You look at people like Howard Lutnick, who's brought in as Commerce Secretary, one of the key people behind the global carbon markets. So I'm very concerned about a lot of these big tech titans who are now suddenly very pro-Trump. Jeff Bezos and the little fascist that runs Facebook, who, of course, famously took down Trump's account. Right. These are dangerous people. You're right. They're very much into transhumanism. They're very much into globalism. A lot of them cooperate very openly with communist China. Google, we're looking at you. Google is absolutely packed with CCP agents. And this is from whistleblowers who have worked in Google at a very high level. So I think these people need to be regarded with great suspicion. Just look at what they did over the last few years. And when you think about the possibility of war breaking out with Taiwan, which you raised, and I think that's a very real possibility, you have to ask yourself, who are the George Soroses and the big tech tyrants going to side with in this war? Yep. And I think it's an open question.
I think it is an open question. But I think it is, like you said, it's a question that we have to be talking about. We have to be talking about now, because it looks like, on the one hand, we've been giving all of these powers that really don't have our best interests at heart. In fact, many of them are avowed enemies of us. We've been giving them money. They're using it against us. And yet we've been subverting and undermining our own military readiness right here at home.
Yep. And you see this so clearly on the military front. We can't keep a lot of our Air Force jets in the sky without communist Chinese components anymore today. We can't keep a lot of our ships out at sea anymore without communist Chinese components. These were deliberate policy decisions that were made by actual people with names who can and should be prosecuted. Why in the world would you do that unless you were deliberately betraying your country? Either that, or you're the biggest moron that's ever existed in the history of humanity. And frankly, as our great Secretary of War, James Forrestal, once explained, consistency has never been a hallmark of stupidity, right? When you see a consistent pattern like this, you've got to suspect that something else is going on. And he put it brilliantly. He said, if these people were merely stupid, occasionally they would make a mistake in our favor. And yet they never do, right? It's always hurting the United States, always building up the enemies of the United States. And then you add AI into this mix, with the AI being programmed with a set of ethics and values that is radically opposed to Christian ethics, biblical principles and values, we are in for some very, very serious trouble. AI is already operating behind the scenes in so many different things you do. If we're not careful here, it is going to completely transform life on this planet, and I don't mean that in a good way.
Well, the last question I have for you is, what happens between now and the inauguration? I just have this sense in my gut right now. I don't get that very often, but I got it right now. What is your sense about what's going to happen?
Well, I think there's a very real possibility, Matt, that we could see more terrorist attacks, whether from jihadists, whether from communists, whether from special forces loyal to the CCP, whether from the CIA, right? Or some patsy that the FBI radicalized, some pothead or some mentally unstable idiot that they have somehow radicalized and convinced to blow something up. So I hope we don't see that. I'm also very concerned about the possibility of what the World Economic Forum has described as a polycrisis. And this is not something that would happen organically. This is something that I think these people want. They want an economic crisis. They want a third world war to break out. They want everything to fall apart for the purpose of using that chaos to advance their vision of total government and undermining Christianity and undermining the nation state. So I think we should be on high alert. I hope Trump is on high alert. I hope our law enforcement community at the local, state, and federal level is on high alert. And once Trump gets in there, he is going to have, I think, a lot of problems on his hands. These globalist evildoers aren't just going to roll over and play dead as he tries to drain the swamp. They're going to fight back, and they're going to fight back hard.
Alex Newman, thanks for joining me today on Patriot Radio. God bless you. Keep up the fight and everything you're doing. It's incredible. So many people have talked to me about you and the work you're doing, that it has changed their perspective, and I think you need to hear that and be encouraged by it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. God bless you, and keep up the good work.
All right. TheNewAmerican.com, LibertySentinel.org. Alex Newman, one of the greatest investigative journalists of our time, uncovered so many things that have changed the narrative, especially over the last 10 years. We're no longer talking about whether there's globalists or not. We're talking about what to do about it, and that's where we need to be. And that brings us to, what can you do about what is going on in the world today and what can you do about this new year. Here's the first thing: prayer and fasting. We need to get back to that as Christians. Actual fasting, no food, fasting, prayer, and not necessarily with an agenda, just praying. And watch what happens in your life. Watch the breakthrough that happens, because we don't fast for power, we fast from power. We don't pray for power, we pray from power. We declare the promises of God over our family and over this nation. And right now, I declare that the schemes, the plans of the enemy are exposed, that what's in darkness is brought to the light. I declare that those who are behind some of the things that we're seeing that have been under the influence of the demonic are not just exposed, they're held accountable. I declare that every one of those plans, every one of those schemes is not just exposed, but it is broken and comes to naught. Jihadi cells in the United States of America are operationalized, and one of our guests coming up here very soon is going to be talking about that. They're operationalized in our communities all over the country. Muslim Brotherhood-owned mosques, through their proxy, they are all over this country. Now, we're not just saying this. This comes from the Holy Land Foundation trial, the largest successfully prosecuted terror financing trial in U.S. history. So, if we know these things are in our midst, what are we doing locally? What are we going to be doing locally? Well, the first step of this, we got to pray, and we got to fast. We have to move. We have to move to action. We have to expose the evil. We have to bring it to justice in our court systems, vote it out of office, and no longer support our enemies with taxpayer money, much less moral support, the moral imprimatur of the U.S. government. It's time for a change, and I think that change is coming soon, January 20th. This is Matt Shea. Thank you for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. And He is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. 2025 is going to be a year of change. Keep up the fight.